Welcome to the Samaritan's Well podcast. We have a special guest today. Her name is Susan Snow. She's an author, a coach, and a professional speaker from Denver, Colorado. Really excited to hear about her journey and her story through PTSD and trauma. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have you. And I know just a couple years ago, you wrote this book and got it, and it's published. Could you tell us the title of the book and kind of just a little about where it came from? We'd love to hear your story.
Sure. Well, my book was, first of all, I wrote the book. It took me 4.5 years to do it.
Okay.
Because I had to relive and feel all the feels and go through all of the trauma all over again and put it on paper. I had to be 100% vulnerable and authentic in writing my story. So I finally got it published. I self-published it myself, and that was January of 2023.
So a couple years ago.
Yeah. It was born out of, initially, it was born out of a need to finally tell my story because for so many years, people had a perception of who I was as a person based on their own story they made in their head of me and my situation and who I should be and how I should handle things and stuff. And I finally got to a point where I had done so much work mentally for my mental health that I got to a point where I was at 50 years old. I don't know what it is about 50.
Yes.
But I drew a line in the sand and said, this is it. This is the time that I need to get this book done.
Wow.
And I think my dad was kind of kicking me in the rear end to get it done too. So that was the start of my journey when I was 50. So.
And what's the name of the book, Susan?
It's The Other Side of the Gun, My Journey from Trauma to Resiliency.
Yes. We talked about it earlier. The title says a lot, but tell us about your story and, tell us about the book, but of course your heart behind the story.
Oh, yeah.
And we understand there was a tragedy that's at the heart of that book.
Yes. Yes. Well, so when I was 17 years old, my dad was a Los Angeles police detective, and he was a lead detective on a case for a robbery ring. On Halloween of 1985, he was testifying in that case, and I had talked to him that morning. And as being a teenager, I wanted to go to a party that night. So I had asked him to go to this party, and he said, absolutely no, because it's a school night. And he was a strict dad.
Sounds like a dad, yeah.
Yep. And so I had planned all these things in my head. I was going to clean the house. I was going to schmooze him when he got home that night and let me go to this party, right?
Sure.
So the plan was that he was going to leave. I had a 6-year-old brother at the time. So he was going to leave the courthouse and go pick him up from school in after school care. And he would come home. My mom came home from work and I was getting ready and the phone rang. I ran to go get it and picked up the phone thinking it was for me. And it wasn't for me. It was a lady from my brother's school. And all she said was that there was a drive-by shooting and my dad was involved.
Oh, no.
And my mom came into the room. I handed her the phone the fast as I could. And I was trying to listen in to the conversation, but I was watching her body language, and her body language was telling me it wasn't good.
Wow.
So she got off the phone and said, we're going to the school. We got in the car. We went to the school. Now, this was nighttime now because it was after 5 in October. And the kids got let out on the back side of the school. So my mom and I parked in the parking lot, which was in the middle of the school, and started heading to the back of the school. And I know I said it was nighttime, but the sky was so lit up with all of the police cars that were there.
Whoa.
There was an ambulance that sat in the street. And as we walked, we caught my dad's truck and started to run towards the truck. The closer we got to the truck, we saw glass on the ground and rounded the corner, and there he was, partially covered. My mom dropped to her knees, started screaming. I literally felt like I was having an out of body experience. I froze. I was not able to comprehend what I was seeing. And so I hyper focused on the ambulance. And in my mind, I kept saying, why isn't anyone helping him? I don't understand why anybody is not helping him. And two police officers quickly came over, grabbed our arms, and escorted us out of the area. We went to the school, into an office. It was a very chaotic scene. And I sat down on a chair just trying to comprehend everything that was going on around me. My mom got taken aside by some detectives. I had no idea where my brother was. I had no idea if he was okay. And I just sat there, and I heard two ladies who worked at the school speaking to one another. And one lady said that my dad was deceased.
Oh no.
And in that moment, my world crashed. I I wanted to get up and run out of that room and run as far from this nightmare as I could, but my body felt like it was made of cement. I couldn't move. My mom came in a little bit later and said, "I'm sending you with a neighbor."
Oh wow.
And I know that in that moment, I wanted to run away from the scene and run away from everything, but I was still a kid. And I felt like I needed to be with my family unit. I needed to
Yes.
be where my brother was, where my mother
Yes.
was. And I unfortunately did not get that. I went with the neighbor, and this neighbor, I felt so bad for her because my neighborhood was total chaos. It was usually a quiet neighborhood. Now there was police officers
Oh wow.
everywhere,
Wow.
helicopters overhead. The media ascended because of the story, and I was completely beside myself in her house. And I had been dating a guy for 3 months, and all I wanted was my boyfriend at that point. So she called him, and he came to the door. She didn't give him enough information. So when he came to the door, he was like, "Grab your purse. What hospital is he at? Where's your mom? Where's your brother?" And I could not spit out the words.
Wow.
I couldn't say it. Um, After him being a little persistent, I finally blurted it out. I said, "He's gone." And he said, "What do you mean he's gone?" And I said, "He's gone. He's not at a hospital. He's gone." And he was 19 at the time. He dropped to his knees and started to sob. And, here we were, two kids, not knowing how to navigate any of this. And in the 80s, the mid 80s, there was no talk of mental health back then.
No. It was very
And
limited.
there were no resources for kids. And there was very little known about PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, back then it was called shell shock because it was
It's true.
attributed to the Vietnam War vets. Um, and so that night, when I finally was able to go home, I went home on my own. There were cars in my driveway I didn't recognize. My house was filled with people I didn't
Wow.
recognize. I could hear my mom's voice, but nobody greeted me. So in my mind, I was free to go hide. And so that's what I did. I went and I hid in my room with my boyfriend, and we just sat and cried. And until he had to leave, I just stayed in my room. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I didn't want people to ask me any questions. I was still wondering where my brother was, but I didn't have anything in me to get up out of that room. It wasn't until the next day, well, during the night, I could hear him crying in his room. So I knew he was home and I
Yeah.
knew that he wasn't physically harmed. And I assumed my mom would just console him during the night because I couldn't even get off my bed. Unbeknownst to us, we too were the target. So it took them 6 days to find the guys that were involved. This was a planned out assassination.
So they planned it to kill him and to kill the family.
Yeah. And so we had that police presence for 6 days. Outside my window, 20 officers in the front yard, backyard,
Wow.
helicopters. I had bodyguards. So in one day, I went from this normal teenage girl with a normal teenage life to this, and no adults to help me navigate this or make me feel like I had support in it. Because my dad saved my brother's life and my brother was 6 years old,
Okay.
all the focus went on him. And
Oh.
of course it did. Of course it did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
However, it took the media 2 days to figure out he had a teenage daughter.
Whoa.
So between me being sent away in a pivotal moment and the media not acknowledging me, I felt like I wasn't important in this scenario.
Oh, yes.
And I had 17 years with this man.
Yes.
And we were very close. He was an amazing human being, but he was an amazing father, amazing friend, colleague. And now he's gone. And I'm having to navigate not only my safety, because he was my safety net as well.
Wow.
And I didn't know that we were targets, but you feel it when you have all that police presence, like
Right.
something's not right.
Right. Right.
And I had all of the emotional things that were going on with trauma.
Mm-hmm.
I had the deep depression.
Okay.
Now I know, looking back, I had suicidal ideation.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be with my dad.
Yeah.
I had panic attacks. I had days where I lived in a fog. I say I was existing, I wasn't living. And I was just kind of going through the motions. So if you pushed me in one direction, that's the direction I would go.
Sure. Yeah.
And my mom, I don't blame her for anything, but and there was a lot of chaotic stuff going on in this timing, but she kind of turtled.
Yeah.
And when she turtled, it pushed me aside as well. So
Yeah. And just for a second, Susan, but this is probably one of those times to think about, no matter how much we're hurting as the parent, we have to gather our children in and say, we're going to get through this together. Would you agree with that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that started a pattern in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And so my mom, she came to us after everything died down
Mm-hmm.
and said, LAPD wants to pay for a therapist for all 3 of us.
Oh, okay.
And you're going to go. So I got voluntold.
You got voluntold. Yes, we all know how voluntold that works.
So, and like I said, if you push me in a direction, I'll go.
Yeah.
And so, but at the time, I was afraid to tell everyone that what was going on with me, because I literally felt like I was crazy. Like
It makes you
had
feel crazy,
snapped.
doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Out of control, So I did. I went to this therapist. And in hindsight, this gentleman was not trauma informed, nor was he trauma competent.
Okay.
He um, didn't want to dip his toes in the weeds with me. He
Oh.
never he never asked me the questions about that night. And I was not capable of verbalizing
Mm-hmm.
or advocating for myself at that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
So when I had these therapy sessions with him, they were very shallow. It
Mm-hmm.
was just more about the relationship I had with my mother, my brother, my
Mm-hmm.
boyfriend, and school.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And every week I kept telling myself, today's the day. He's going to say something. He's going to do something. He's going to
Sure.
make me feel better.
Sure.
And it never
It
happened.
just never happened.
A year later, he looked at me and said, Susan, you're a well rounded young lady. You're going to be fine for the rest of your life. And I
Whoa.
don't need to see you anymore.
Whoa.
So I walked out of there saying, okay, I've snapped. I'm
Uh-huh.
crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Professional can't even help me.
Right.
So I'm going to have to figure this out on my own.
Whoa.
And what I ended up doing is I adopted an emotional mask. And that mask was based on what people told me I was. So when people were saying, "Oh, you're so brave, Susan.
Mm-hmm.
You're so
Mm-hmm.
strong,
Mm-hmm.
Susan."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Okay, that's the mask I'm going to wear and
Okay.
nobody is going to see the chaos that's
All the
inside of
swirl
me."
behind it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't allow that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Even with my own boyfriend. I mean, he saw
Wow.
some of it, but
Mm-hmm.
he didn't see all of it. And, my mom never asked, I never told. And I lived like that. I lived in fight or flight
Okay.
for 14 years of my life.
Whoa. All the
I
way through your 20s.
All the way through my 20s, I
Mm.
got married to the boyfriend.
Okay.
We're still married today.
Oh, good.
We'll be together 40 years next month. That's
That's
crazy.
awesome. Wow.
I'm crazy. And it was just such a struggle, but in hindsight and looking back, it was like me not being diagnosed and me not being healed kept me from having genuine friendships and relationships. And
Yes.
I have one of my chapters is called rose colored glasses because
Mm.
that's what I wore. I walked around and I was not able to see things for what they truly were.
I tell people, Susan, that when you go through a profound trauma, it fractures that whole you
Yeah.
that is there. It fractures it, and you leave a part of yourself behind. And it takes real courage. People don't understand, not just by the person with the PTSD and trauma, but it takes courage by the counselor to go back there with you,
Right.
because you literally it's like you have to go back and retrieve a part of yourself that's left behind, but you
Right.
have to tell the story. You
Mm-hmm.
have to tell the story, and someone has to have the courage to walk with you in that. Would
Yeah.
What would you say about that? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And
Yes.
and you'll see as we continue
Yes, tell me.
the significance of that
Okay.
and my message around that because I do have one.
Yes.
So, like I said, I married the boyfriend. I
Okay.
had 2 kids, and we decided in 97 that we were going to relocate to Colorado
Okay. From California to
from
Colorado.
California because his family is Minnesota.
Okay.
My family was in California. It was kind of smack in the middle.
Mhm.
So we came here, and when we came here, I was a hairdresser at the time. And we moved in April of 97, and I was working on April 20th of 1999
Okay.
at a salon that was close to Littleton, Colorado.
Oh, okay.
I think you know where you're
I
going
think I
with
know where we're
this.
going. Yes.
I worked that day. I put a client under the dryer and went into the back room to take a quick break, turned on the TV, and up popped all of the live coverage of the Columbine shootings.
Yes.
As I sat there and I watched it, I had a visceral reaction.
Oh, yes.
I had flashbacks.
Yes.
I saw the school, the lights, all the things. And I started to sweat and turn white. And I knew I was going to have a panic attack, or I was in the
Yes.
process. And my colleagues didn't know my story.
Oh,
They
wow. Yeah.
had no idea, because when I relocated away from California, my goal was that nobody knew me. No, I
Fresh
wanted to
start.
leave that part
Hmm.
behind, and look where I am now.
Yeah.
But I wanted to leave that part behind. And so my colleagues were like, "What is going on with you?"
Right.
And remember, I was told I was going to be fine for the rest of my life.
Sure.
So I couldn't even recognize what was happening to me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And everybody left the room. And I did what I always do. I put that mask back on.
Oh, yes.
And I went out. I finished my day with my clients. Now, everybody around me was crying and
Oh,
mad and
yes.
you name it. I was stoic. I continue. I just was like, this isn't going to affect me.
Wow.
And finished my day. But the minute I walked through those doors and got into my car, it all came flooding back. All of
Yes.
it. The
Yes.
suicidal ideation, the
Yes.
anxiety, the depression, like it all hit me like a Mack truck.
Mm.
And I stopped sleeping, and I knew I was in trouble. I had fights in my head about, I want to be here. Like, I don't want to be here. I don't want to feel like this. But on the other side of it, it was, I have babies and I
Yeah.
can't leave my babies.
Yeah. I can't leave them.
And my husband is a very smart man, and he recognized things that were going on.
Yeah.
So he met me at the door one day and he said, "You have two choices. You either get help today, or I'm putting you in a hospital."
Okay.
And I said, "Okay." I put up the white flag and I said, "Okay, I'll go today." And I made an
That's good.
appointment with a physician.
Okay.
Went and saw the physician, and he put me on antidepressants
Okay.
because that's what they do.
Yeah, they do. Yes.
And then he handed me a business card and he said, "I want you to make an appointment with this woman who's a therapist. She's a trauma therapist." And I was
Oh,
like,
done that before.
I tried that 14 years ago and that
Yep.
didn't work for me. So
Yep.
what makes you think this is going to work now? And he
Yeah.
said, "You have no choice." And I
Okay.
said, "You're right. I have no choice."
We got to try something. We have to do something.
Yeah. And I made an appointment with this woman. And I knew in the first 3 minutes of sitting with her that she was different.
Wow.
I She was asking the questions that
The
he
tough
should have been
questions.
asking.
Yes.
And it gave me a safe space,
Oh, that's
enough
wonderful.
where I could be vulnerable, because vulnerability is key.
Yes, it is.
I could be vulnerable and I could tell her what happened to me at 17 and what I was currently dealing with. And as I sat there and she listened to me intently, she looked at me and she said, "Susan, everything you've gone through since you were 17 is normal because you have PTSD." And I was like, wait a minute.
You got to be kidding.
I wasn't in the art, like I wasn't in military. I didn't go to
Right.
war. What are you talking about?
Mhm.
And she said, "Susan, anyone who goes through anything traumatic can have PTSD. But what you need to understand is that PTSD isn't something that just goes away. It's
No.
something you learn to manage.
Mhm.
And in that moment, oh, the gratitude, I had hope.
Wow.
For the first time in my life, I realized, oh my God, I found my person.
That's
I've been looking and
awesome.
searching, like this is what I
Yes.
needed at 17, 18, 19, right?
Yes.
And she's now here and she's understands and knows how to guide me in the right direction.
Wow.
And
That's
I was
wonderful.
so grateful. And this is why this is my message.
So
This
your
is
healing journey
why.
really started that day.
Absolutely, it
Now
did.
we get to start healing. And of course, it was brought to the surface by another really parallel terrible trauma.
Yes.
You had experienced the first one firsthand, but the second one came, just kind of in your vicinity.
Yeah.
And of course, there may have been people all across the country that day that had a similar
Yeah.
reaction because they had
No doubt.
trauma that was unresolved.
And no
Wow.
doubt.
So tell us about those next few weeks and months as you worked with her.
Well, I was very grateful for her for the fact that she knew I was a hot mess. Like
Sure.
she knew I was dealing with a lot of different things. And so what she did, instead of like throwing everything at me all at once,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
we attacked what was happening from presently really dire situation.
Good.
And at the time, I was not sleeping. And
Okay.
when you don't rest, it
Right.
it gets your nervous system all kinds of out of whack.
It becomes like a
And
snowball effect, doesn't
it
it? It
does.
affects everything else.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
I was not sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, we need to address that first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And I said, okay. And she said, have you ever journaled before?
Okay.
And I kind of looked at her sideways, like, what? And she said, well, you can journal in different ways. So you can either write, some people do art, some people do music. Now there's podcasting.
Sure.
And what it does is it just gets everything that's swirling in your head
Mm-hmm.
out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little bit of a skeptic.
Sure. Sure. A
And I
lot of
thought,
people are, yeah.
how can something that simple be
Mm-hmm.
so like
Mm-hmm.
make a difference?
Mm-hmm.
So she says, what's your flavor? Like, what do you do? And I said,
Sure.
well, I write. And she said, great. Take a pad of paper and a pen, put it by your bed. And before you go to sleep tonight, here's some prompts. And I want you to write. And I don't want you to worry about punctuation. I don't want you to worry about spelling. She's like, heck, it doesn't even have to make sense.
There you go.
Just put it on the paper. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, all right.
Just get it from inside to outside,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And like I said, I was very skeptical, but the
Mm-hmm.
first night I did it, I got a couple hours of sleep and I thought, huh. The second
Wow.
night, I got a little bit more sleep. And by the third night, I was sleeping like
Ooh.
a baby. And I didn't want to admit it. I
Whoa.
was like, no, this did not work. This
No,
kind
it's
of
not the
worked.
stupid journaling.
Yeah. So when I went back to see her the next week, she said, well, how did it go? And I said, well, I've been sleeping for 4 days. So apparently something
Wow.
worked. And she
Apparently
said,
something's working.
yeah. She said, great. Keep going. Keep doing
It's
it.
great.
And I said,
It's
great.
great.
So that was my first tool.
That's
And I
awesome.
teach people now. I teach people about journaling and the importance of journaling.
That's a wonderful first tool. Like, what were a couple of the prompts that she gave you that you teach people?
Uh, well, for one, she asked me like because what would happen is as it started to get dark and I knew that I was going to have to go to bed, I would start to feel the anxiety starting to build up. So she said,
Okay.
elaborate on that. So
Okay. Good.
what are the feelings that you're feeling
Mm-hmm.
as you're leading up to going to bed? So that was a
Mm-hmm.
prompt.
That's great.
And then later, we talked about like what went well today, what where are, opportunities to
Mm-hmm.
change things or change your mindset around things or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, right? And that was later down the road, but initially
Mm-hmm.
it was what's your body going through, like being very
Yes.
present with what my physical body is going through before I was to lay my head down and start, try to go to sleep. So
Mm-hmm.
that that was important. And then the second thing we addressed was my anxiety.
Okay.
And she introduced me into breathing techniques. And so
Oh,
one of the
yes.
breathing techniques that I still use today and I
Mm-hmm.
teach is box breathing,
Okay.
using visualization and being very aware of your breath, being very aware of your body, and centering yourself that way, so that I could align my nervous system again when I start feeling
Yes.
out of control.
Yes.
So we talked about that. And what I was really great about her is that she was kind of ahead of her time. She was a younger woman and she was kind of ahead of her time. So she did a lot of research on other things outside of your normal practices,
Okay.
because even breathing techniques back then weren't huge. And in the 90s, it started to get a little bit more out there, the tapping techniques and those kind
Right.
of modalities were starting to get out there a little bit more and people were utilizing them a little bit more. So she got to introduce me to all these different kind of modalities and I kind of was able to pick and choose which worked
The ones that
best
seemed
for
effective.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's what I tell people. There's not a one size fits all.
Mm-hmm.
You have to try different things to see if it gives you relief, if it
Mm-hmm.
allows you to heal a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
gives you some support. And because what I
And
did
Susan, how
may
did
not help
telling your
others.
story? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Right. It's not a one size fit all. Right. It's not a cookie cutter. I've found that true. How did you go through the process of really telling your story to her and processing that with her? I'm sure that was a significant part of it eventually.
Yeah, I think the one thing, and I remember this very clearly, is the questions. When she said to me, tell me what it was like that night, like
Mm.
my feelings, like how I was feeling,
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to open up and tell her everything that I was feeling in that moment.
That's so good.
And it just progressed from there. And then she asked me now, at that present time, what are the things that you're feeling now? You know? And so that was it for me. I knew that because she asked that question of me, that she was genuinely wanting to help me, wanting to guide me, wanting not afraid to
Not
step in the
afraid.
weeds, not
Not afraid.
afraid to go there with me. And
Ye-
I had a sense that she was that person that would be able to come alongside me and walk me through this. So, yeah.
You do. You have to weep with those who weep. As a counselor or a mentor or a coach, if you're going to help someone, it could be your best friend, but if they're going through something and you're going to help them go through it, you have to cry with them. You have to listen to the story. You have to ask them about it. And I've got, so many examples of that, but I will tell you when I work with people and we go back to the trauma, two of the questions that I'll ask that I think are that we keep coming back to, in this case, it would be, okay, how does that 17-year-old girl feel? And how do you feel towards the 17-year-old?
Mhm.
Did how would you how would how it- would you see those two questions framing some of that work that you did, Susan.
Oh yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel like I talk to her all the time. You know, you have to go back to that point and you know, I did that I did this on my own, but when I was writing the book, that was a process that I went through is like, what do I want to tell her?
That's good.
And so my second part, so my book is in two parts. The first part is about the
Okay.
trauma. The
Okay.
second part is about how I got through it. And
Oh, so good.
it's kind of like a letter to myself at 17 because I'm basically telling people the lessons that I learned through all of this. So all the lessons that I've learned from healing through things and what I got from my dad in hindsight, like the lessons in life that he gave me that I can recognize now. And one of those is being present. He was a very present father.
That is so beautiful. Yeah, that's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean, I know that like when I do talk to people, yes, yes, you do have to weep with them. However,
Yes.
you do have to realize that this is a them thing
Hmm.
and not make it about yourself.
Good point.
So you have to kind of distance yourself in that mindset. I can under I can understand as far as honoring their their emotions, honoring the way that they're feeling is valid. I can validate that. But I would never say like if someone is grieving, I don't ever say I understand how you're feeling. And the reason I don't
Hmm.
is because I didn't have the same relationship with that person they're grieving for.
Right.
So
That's true.
there's no way I can know how they're feeling. So
No,
that's
that's true.
same with trauma, right?
Hmm.
I never compare my trauma to anybody else's,
Hmm.
right?
It is very unique.
Everybody's experience is different.
Hmm.
Everybody deals with trauma differently, and I recognize that. So I recognized that in the beginning because my mom, with her healing, or not even healing, I won't even say
Hmm.
healing,
With her
her
process or
her
whatever. Yeah.
process, her coping
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
alcohol.
Okay.
And
Okay.
unfortunately, that only exacerbated the abuse.
Right. Right.
So I watched that. And then as my brother got older, he started to use and he went into, self hatred
Oh boy.
and, self sabotaging things in his life. And he's doing great now.
Oh, good to hear.
He's in his healing journey. He's doing great,
Hmm.
and he and I are very close. When we were
Wonderful.
younger, we had no relationship.
Okay.
And that was because he was making these decisions in his life, and I felt like I needed to protect mine.
Sure.
And, but I also recognize that people use things to cope with, and I am not in judgment by any means. However, I will say that it was difficult as being a child watching the drinking and the drugging and
Sure.
also
That's an
living.
that's really another painful part of your story,
It
honestly.
was, and there was a lot of shame involved in that, a lot of
Right.
guilt involved in that because at the time when I was starting to heal, they were still dealing with things, and I had this feeling like if I'm healing, I should help them heal. right? I
Oh,
was not
sure.
understanding that my healing was my healing
Right.
and they have to choose to heal.
Yes.
And if they don't choose to heal, then I need to figure out what that looks like for me
Right. Right.
in that relationship. So
Yep.
when I wrote my book, I knew that in telling my story authentically, I needed to tell hers as well.
Okay.
And I would also discuss some things that my husband and I have gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fear in that.
Sure.
Also, the fact that, there were two men that were still incarcerated, and I was afraid of retaliation,
Right.
putting myself out there.
Right.
But one day I kind of had to sit back um, and say to myself, what is the real purpose behind writing your book?
Mm-hmm.
What is your purpose? And I realized that my purpose was to show people, so especially in the law enforcement world, there was a lot of anger and hurt revolved around my dad's death because of my brother, because he was there, because, it was the biggest insecurity for police officers to have your child there,
Sure.
and it really hit people in a certain spot in their heart. And I felt like people could see that I healing through this and that I have found the resiliency side of it, that maybe it would help them to heal themselves.
It's
And
inspirational.
and
Yes.
then I thought about, just in general, how I felt that day and having hope and knowing that I could heal from this and that whole journey. I wanted that for other people. And so I thought
Yes.
about the faceless people out there that needed to hear my message.
So good.
And and so anytime that fear would come around, I have my tagline, I just bulldozed right through it. I saw the faceless people out there and I just bulldozed through it. And I knew with my mother that it could either end what was hanging on in our relationship, or it could open a conversation.
Sure.
And with my husband, I had to be okay if this opened wounds for us and we had to
Yeah.
heal from that.
Yes.
And it did end my relationship with my mother.
Okay.
My mom chose not to have a relationship with me any longer,
Okay. She was
and
upset.
I
Okay.
am totally at peace with that. And I was
That's
okay with
hard.
that. It
That's
is
hard.
hard.
That's really hard. Sometimes, we make these difficult choices and we don't command anybody to leave us, but they may leave us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's it's painful. It's grief, but you're really trying to own your story, because the courageous thing about walking through this and eventually writing it down on and getting it into a book is I see where, for a long time you had just done your best to survive,
Mhm.
but you'd left that girl behind, so to speak. She
Mhm.
never got to really tell her story. And
Nope.
then at 31, you go back to her in a sense and begin letting her tell the story through the journaling and the counseling, and just one step at a time. And then ultimately, here's the book. The whole story comes out really for the world to see. And we're just thankful, Susan, that you had the courage to do that. And man, so much has happened since that first visit with your counselor there in Denver.
Oh,
I'm just
absolutely.
so thankful for that. And when I hear those good stories about the counselors that really care, Man, after doing this for over 30 years, it does my heart really good.
Oh, I'm
So,
sure. Yeah.
so
It
thankful.
makes a big difference. And I tell people all the time, your healing is your healing.
Yes.
And because I hear it all the time, therapy didn't work for me. Well, you
No,
didn't
no.
find your person.
Right,
You
right.
haven't found your person.
It's a good word.
And when you do find your person and you're able to be vulnerable with that person, your healing will start. It will
Yes.
start. If you're not capable of doing that, if you're not willing to feel like you have a safe space or that person is a safe person to help you with this, then it's not your person.
That's right.
And I tell people, interview your therapist.
That's
Make
good.
sure they are
Good counsel.
understanding the type of trauma that you have experienced,
Yes.
because traumas are different and they have to be addressed differently.
Yes.
We can't be all lumped up into one big trauma pile.
Hmm.
Everybody is different. And so your person, your spiritual leader, your counselor, your whoever needs to understand that type of trauma.
That is so good. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. We're so excited about, your book that you published. And of course, you do professional speaking, you do coaching. How can our listeners reach you? What's the best way to connect with you, Susan?
Sure. I have a website.
Okay.
It's susansnowspeaks.com. And it's kind of a one-stop shop. I have information about my speaking on there. It also has information on my coaching,
Okay.
and it also has information about my book. So the book is on Amazon. It is currently in paperback form and Kindle form.
Cool.
And coming soon, I just got out of a studio and I did my audiobook.
Oh, good for you. So many people love the Audible versions.
Yeah.
That's wonderful that you did that.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is so
That
cool.
was a journey on its own.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Well, Susan, thank you so much for today. We just
Thank you.
wish you all the best out in Colorado,
Thank
and
you.
we'll put all your information on this podcast. And just thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, you're welcome.
Bye bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please do us a favor and like, subscribe, and share with others who might need it. And you can find additional resources at SamaritansWell.com.